All right, folks, welcome back to Technical Knockout, the Hardcore Casual MMA podcast. I'm your host, as always, Hussein. We are going to talk about a little recap of last week's card, Namajunas versus Cortez, and then the very few fights that we are excited for coming up in Verna Jandiroba versus Amanda Lemos, namely the main event and a couple other fights on the main card. So without further ado, let's get into it. So last weekend we had the return of Rose Namajunas at flyweight, coming off of her victory over Amanda Hebus. She drew Macy Barber originally, and what would have been a really good fight for the division as far as a prospect fighting a established name. We ended up getting Tracy Cortez instead of Barber, and still kind of fits in that same slot of a prospect getting an opportunity against an established name in the sport. And Cortez came up short, Namajunas had a pretty good game plan here, staying on the outside with her long strikes, kind of peppering away, and then using the wrestling where she could. A lot of people thought that Cortez would have the grappling advantage in this fight, but like I mentioned in the preview pod, Namajunas kind of came up as a grappler, so it's no surprise to see that she has a ton more experience than Cortez in some of those positions, and, generally is, the more accomplished fighter, so it's not crazy to think that she could go out there and do what she did. So good performance from Namajunas. Really not much more to say there. I didn't like that Pat Barry going into the fifth round told her to just shadow box for 5 minutes. I thought that was really stupid. Regardless of if you thought she was up at that point, which she definitely was. You want to see your fighter go for it and go for the kill, especially when fighting somebody who is so obviously not on her level. But that's just my opinion from the fan perspective. I understand wanting to secure the win bonus. There's no chance that Cortez could have knocked her out, but anything can happen in MMA. So I understand the conservative approach in the last round. That being said, not a very exciting fight. Co-main event, also not a very exciting fight. I was very happy to see Muslim Salikov get the W here, though. I really felt like he did more in the first and most of the rounds, honestly. I think you can make an argument that he won every round. Third round was a little bit closer because Ponzi went to the wrestling, but, Salikov still landed the better strikes in that round. So I was happy to see Salikov get that dub. It seemed like he was in control for most of the fight, at least when I was watching it. Maybe it was just the second and third now that I'm thinking about it. But yeah, so a pretty solid performance there from two old welterweights. Both of them washed. One washed by way of age, the other one washed by way of injuries and time away from the sport. So it is what it is. Decent fight there. Drew Dober versus John Silva was incredible. One of the best fights we've seen so far this year. John Silva really just, man, if this guy, announced in a press conference tonight that he's going to run for president, I think he has a good chance of winning. The dude is, I feel like he could do whatever he puts his mind to, he's super athletic. He seems to have a very measured approach for being such a wild man. When I say that, I mean, he is a wild man in the sense that it seems like he gets distracted in the cage. We talked about him playing with his food against Weston Wilson and to a lesser extent against Charles Jourdain, kind of taunting and, flowing. I really feel like that's where he's super comfortable, though, in the octagon, is when he's having fun, when he's playing around. Against Drew Dober, he was able to find some really, really wicked spinning elbows when his back was against the fence and Dober was pressuring him. Obviously the cut was opened up by a really bad one, and then a left hook, too. His left hook looked very crispy. He had all the speed that he had at featherweight and then some going up a weight class, and just as much of the power. Maybe not as much because, Dober has a crazy chin. But he did still rock Dober at moments in that fight. So I'd like to see Jean go back down to featherweight, but I get the sense that the dude just loves to fight and will continue to take fights in both weight classes if they present themselves. But yeah, I'd really like to see him make a run for that featherweight strap because, yeah, it just seems like he has that factor, that X factor, the explosiveness, the power, the shot selection is beautiful from him. He really knows where to pick his spots, and I'm just so excited to see what he does in the sport. For Drew Dober, it sucks, losing by doctor stoppage in a fight that he was on his way to losing either way. But, it is what it is. Next, you had Gabriel Bonfim versus Angelusa. This fight was a slop fest. Angelusa won the first round, I thought, and then just got exhausted or just stopped trying. And Gabriel Bonfim was content to keep throwing volume, so he won that decision pretty easily. Julian Erosa submitted Christian Rodriguez in the first round. And this was one that stung, I'll be honest. I love Juicy J, and I always think that he's a very live dog, as I mentioned in the preview pod. But I thought Christian Rodriguez would kind of turn it up on him and reach a different level here. He was forced to go up a weight class, which makes all sense in the world because, he was missing weight consistently at bantamweight and using his physicality as an edge, which really sucks for his opponents, but for us bettors makes no difference. So it looked like he was having some trouble with the physicality of Erosa in there. His punches weren't hurting him as he wanted them to, and when he got to the grappling exchanges, Juicy J's a black belt of a very high degree, so he was able to put Rodriguez in some very compromising positions, and I kind of felt like the fight ended before it really got started. They were having some good exchanges on the feet and some good grappling scrambles, but when Erosa got that body lock, it was really only a matter of time. Rodriguez did get out of the body lock and immediately reshot for a takedown to try to maintain or to try to establish some top position, and that's when Erosa got that guillotine on him and wrapped it up really tight, really quick. Juicy J's known for that front choke, for that guillotine, so no shame in Rodriguez's game to fall victim to that, as many men have done it before. And, I'm still excited to see where he goes from here because I do feel like he's a very hot prospect. But, not a great night for the TKO prospects, for the fans of, for the people that we've been bigging up on this podcast for a long time. Cody Brundage got a no contest against Abdulrazak Alhassan, and it was really frustrating because this is not the first time we've seen him quit in the fight. I said in the preview pod, what can we say about Cody Brundage that we haven't said about Pearl Harbor or any other disaster? The dude is just a nightmare. I mean, as soon as he faces adversity, he wilts. And in this case, it was in the first 4 seconds of the fight when Abdulrazak Alhassan landed a really nice elbow on the side of his head. He did land some other ones to the back of the head, which is not cool. But, any other fighter in that position would have been happy to have a point taken away or, keep fighting. But Cody Brundage is not cut from that cloth. He's happy to take the no contest and get another chance to fight in the UFC. I'd really like to see him get cut or for them to remake this matchup because it looked like Alhassan was going to knock him out pretty soon. Charles Johnson knocked out Joshua Van in the third round. Boy, this one stings. I'm a huge Joshua Van fan. I think a lot of MMA fighters have been hot on him, or MMA fans have been hot on him recently. The dude has a very exciting style to watch and seems to be a very smart fighter. That being said, his one hang-up has been his defense. His what's the word? Like his tendency to take shots in the pocket is not good for a young fighter and not good for a long career. And Charles Johnson completely took advantage of that. Of course, Charles Johnson was so huge in there, dude. Like, I don't know how this guy makes 125. Like, he must have been like 5'9", and Van is like 5'4", so he was getting dwarfed. And a lot of the striking exchanges, Johnson was just simply longer and landing better shots. But Van had some good work in there. He was able to eat up the body a bit of Johnson, which is, a great tactic at elevation. He was able to land some good punches. But Johnson just seemed to be the longer fighter and the more powerful one. And he tagged Van a few times in this fight. And in that third round, we talked about how the third round was going to be really exciting for both guys because they both kind of simmer up to a rolling boil. Johnson knocked him out in 20 seconds in the third round. So, it is what it is. It sucks to see Van on the losing end of such a bad knockout. The uppercut that Charles Johnson landed was absolutely beautiful. It was money. And, I think some well-needed time off would do Van a lot of good here. But, I'm still very excited to see where he goes in this division. Charles Johnson, on the other hand, I think is riding a little bit of momentum coming off of that W, so hopefully they can give him a nice fight moving up the ranks. I don't think he has, championship potential, so to speak, in this division. He's kind of been around for a while. But, that being said, any given Sunday, that kind of thing, he could get his way up there, no problem. Jasmine Jasudavicius versus Fatima Klein. This was one that we were kind of going back and forth on, but eventually ended up siding on the edge of experience on Jasmine's side and the momentum. What I did not take into account was that Klein was coming up a weight class here because it was a short notice fight, and boy, did she look small in there. Jasmine is not the biggest flyweight. I mean, she's relatively, big for the division, but she's not Manon Fiorot or any of these other huge flyweights. And she just absolutely dwarfed Klein in all the grappling exchanges, just completely manhandled her. And went to a decision victory that there was absolutely no controversy that she won. Jasmine is a very strong fighter, and I think if you get her at any odds that are less than 175 or an underdog spot, for sure take that. She can beat any woman at flyweight on her best day. I feel she's very well rounded. She's very strong in the grappling, very smart in the striking, and I think she just continues her climb up the ranks. So good win for Jazz there. Montel Jackson knocked out Damon Blackshear in the first punch that he threw. Crispy 1-2 right down the pipe. Blackshear was not ready for it. Jackson has incredible power in his hands, so no surprise there. But I thought this fight was going to go a little bit longer. I thought we were going to see things play out a bit. But we did pick Montel Jackson, so it is what it is. Luana Santos ran through Maria Agapova in another not surprising fight. Agapova has horrendous ground defense, and Luana Santos was smart to take advantage of that early and get that submission in the first 3 minutes or so. Andre Petrosky fought a very smart fight against Josh Fremd. Josh Fremd really does not have many tools by way of athleticism or technique. He's all grit, like we talked about. And I was worried that Petrosky might be washed here, but he showed that he's not. He showed that he still has some gas in the tank, and if you put him up against somebody who he can manhandle and out physical, for lack of a better term, he will do that. So good win there for Petrosky. Much needed win there. And then Evan Elder submitted Darius Flowers relatively quickly as well. Darius Flowers had a pretty decent first round and then absolutely gassed out at the beginning of the second. So Elder took advantage of that. We talked about how that would be a pattern on this on the fight card. Being in Denver with a lot of these fights happening in short notice, it's no surprise that we saw a lot of, honestly, I'm surprised we didn't see more people gas out, but in the case of Klein, in the case of Flowers, to a lesser extent, Andre Lusa as well, to a lesser extent, Ponzinibbio, a lot of guys started to look really bad late in the fight, and that's what will happen when you fight at 5,000 feet, So, pretty solid card overall, really not too bad. It sucks that a couple of our favorite prospects got killed off in Van and Rodriguez, but those guys will be back. We have a few shining moments from this card for John Silva, Bonfim, Jasmine, Montel Jackson, Andre Petrosky. I'm happy to see those guys win. I do like all of those fighters, and I think they all gave a good account for themselves. I think the biggest winner on the night had to have been John Silva because that fight was incredible. But yeah, so it's a pretty decent fight card there in Denver, and we are going back to the basement, baby. Back to the Apex in Las Vegas. We have Amanda Lemos versus Verna Jandiroba. This is a very interesting fight, if you ask me. Amanda Lemos, 37 years old, striker, very strong striker. Verna Jandiroba, 36 years old, very strong grappler and tough as nails. This is an interesting fight because Lemos has, we talked about her incessantly on this podcast, so we're big fans of Amanda Lemos, but, she has a very similar style to Davison Figueiredo. She fights very tall. She throws a big right hand. She has a nice uppercut, a nice front kick, and a good guillotine if people shoot on her. Now, that being said, she has a lot of the same shortcomings as Figueiredo, wherein her defense is not great. She kind of relies on her chin and her physicality and her power. And if you are a smart wrestler, you can kind of diffuse her. We saw that. Who was it that wrestled her to death? Zhang Weili. Yeah, Weili beat the shit out of her everywhere, but the wrestling was really the big gulf there. She got submitted by Jessica Andrade very early in the fight, too, and knocked out years ago by Leslie Smith in a weight class she did not belong in. In her most recent fight, she beat Mackenzie Dern, but she had some trouble in the grappling in that fight as well. I think Verna Jandiroba is going to come out. It's not going to be any surprise. I think she's going to come out with a very wrestling-heavy game plan here and try to put Amanda Lemos on the back foot and try to, make her uncomfortable and put her in positions that she doesn't want to be in. And I honestly, I really trust Jandiroba to be able to do that. I think Jandiroba is one of the most consistently underrated and undervalued fighters at women's strawweight. I think people often overlook her because she's not pretty and she doesn't have a pretty fighting style either. But she is on a 3-fight winning streak over very solid fighters and Angela Hill. That's a victory that I rate very high. against Marina Rodriguez, against Lupe Godinez. Both of those decisions people were kind of iffy on, but I felt like she did enough to win both of those fights. So I really do like Verna in this matchup. I think Jandiroba has the more consistent style. I think Lemos kind of relies on her power and athleticism, like we said, and her durability, and I'm just not sure that she's going to be able to find the chin of Jandiroba, and if she does, I don't think she's going to be able to put it away. So I'm going to go with Jandiroba here, probably by decision, but I could see her getting a submission at some point in the 3rd, 4th, or 5th round. Then you have a middleweight affair in the co-main event between Brad Tavares and Junyoung Park, the Iron Turtle. This is a fight I'm very excited for the Iron Turtle to come back into the win column. He takes on Brad Tavares, who has stellar takedown defense, and, a pretty shoddy chin these days. We're talking about a man who got knocked out in most of his losses. And most recently has a win over the ghost of Chris Weidman, where he was even still getting tagged up in that fight. So I think, this is Junyoung Park's fight to lose. I'm surprised that they only have him at a -180. I guess it's because of Tavares' affinity for taking down or for stopping takedowns, and Junyoung Park has kind of been a wrestler more than anything in his career. But just because Brad is really good at defending takedowns doesn't mean that he won't be able to get smushed against the fence by Junyoung Park. Junyoung Park, I thought, did enough to win his fight against Andre Muniz. And before that, he was on like a 4 or 5 fight win streak. So I'd like to see the Iron Turtle get back to his winning ways, and I'm going to be picking him in the co-main event against Brad Tavares relatively safely. Then we have Steve Garcia versus Sungwoo Choi. I don't know, maybe this card was supposed to be in Korea or something. They got a few Koreans on here. But yeah, Sungwoo Choi, I remember him mostly for having that double knockdown against Mike Trizano a couple years ago, before Mike Trizano got cut from the UFC or left the UFC. I'm not sure what the story was there. But yeah, and in his most recent fight has a victory over Jarno Aarons, who really sucks. But yeah, I mean, Sungwoo Choi's been knocked out a few times in his career. Steven Garcia has huge knockout power and really good striking. I remember him beating up Chase Hooper, knocking out Shaileon Nerdy and Becky, and most recently finishing Melchizedek Costa. But all those victories have aged well. Nerd and Becky, very strong fighter. Melchizedek Costa is fucking tearing it right now. And Chase Hooper most recently had a super, super dominant performance over Slava Claus. So Steve Garcia, I think, is one to watch. He kind of has a workman-like style where he's very, how do I describe this? He's very reserved, but still aggressive. Kind of reminds me of like a street fighter, in the sense that like he is very comfortable in the octagon, and if he can land a 1-2 on you, or 1-2-3, or any other simple combination of punches, he's happy to just do that. He doesn't have to go for huge spinning attacks. He doesn't have to go for huge flying knees and overhands. He's happy to have his, technical brawler style, I would say, like a technical brawler, as if that makes any sense. And pick his shots and land where he can. So I'm gonna side with Steve Garcia here, man. I really feel like he's gonna land some clean punches on Sungwoo Choi, who kind of leaves his chin out to hang sometimes. And if he can't get the knockout, so be it. But I do think he'll win this fight regardless. And then we have Kurt Holobaugh versus Kanan Kruszewski. I don't know who Kanan Kruszewski is, but I know Holobaugh, and I know he's tough as nails. So I'm gonna ride with Holobaugh, or at least put the over in this fight. Then you have Dooho Choi versus Bill Algeo. This is a very interesting matchup. Between two guys that I thought would do a lot better in the division than they have, and two guys who got beat by Kyle Nelson, sadly. Bill Algeo, Senor Perfecto, they call him. He has a very... How do you describe Bill Algeo's style? He's very slow and kind of leaves things out to hang. Sort of reminds me of Julian Erosa in that sense, and that he's dangerous for sure, but he's really dangerous as the fight goes on. If you're able to get him out of there early, or at least stun him early, you can have some good success against him. He only has that one knockout loss in his last fight against Kyle Nelson, but in that fight, I mean, people argued that it was an early stoppage. I thought he got hit clean way too many times in that fight. I was there live. Either way, I don't know if Choi still has that dog in him, man. I feel like the dog is has been kind of neutered. He's coming out. He's on a 4-fight skid with a draw in his last fight, where he should have won, but it was a draw because he got deducted a point. He got knocked out by Charles Jourdain. He got knocked out by Jeremy Stevens. That was years ago. Both those fights years ago, and had that awesome war with Cub Swanson. So we haven't seen a ton from Choi lately. Just that draw against Nelson, where he did look a little lackluster. So I really don't know who to pick in this fight. I'm probably gonna side with the over, because I think both guys are pretty tough, and this fight should go a little bit longer. So I'll probably just go with the over in that matchup. Cody Durden versus Bruno Silva. This is a pretty good matchup here between a striker and a grappler. The striker being Bruno Silva, the grappler being Cody Durden. But that being said, both guys are pretty well rounded. I'm not sure to pick. I just think that's going to be a fun flyweight fight. Lee Jong-yong was fighting Haider Emil. Not much to say there. Brian Kelleher versus Cody Gibson. I guess you have to go with Gibson because Kelleher is so washed these days and can't take a punch, but Cody Gibson is not any threat on the feet, really. I mean, this is it's I expect it to be a slop fest. And I kind of hope that Kelleher wins, but at the same time I really do like Gibson, so I don't know who to pick. I'll probably stay away from that one. Miranda Maverick should run through Dione Barboza. It's an easy fight for her. Trey Ogden versus Lok Rashabov. Don't know what to think about that one. I think it's going to be a sloppy fight either way. Maybe Lok gets it done. Then Luana Carolina versus Lucia Podolova is an awesome fight. I'm really excited for that one. Luana Carolina, most recently coming off of her knockout victory over Julia Stoliarenko. And, she lost to Molly McCann by that spinning elbow, but she's looked pretty good recently, all things considered. She's not a great fighter by any stretch of the imagination. But, Lucia Podolova has not looked fantastic since she came back to the UFC. She had a good stint outside of it, but she got wrestled pretty hard against Jocelyn Edwards and Island Perez. So, I'd imagine that, Carolina saw those fights and she is going to go to the grappling, but that's not really her strong suit. She's more of a striker. If Podolova can get her striking going on the feet here, I think she has all the chance in the world to take this one home. If you guys have never seen her fight with Irene Aldana, Lucia Podolova and Irene Aldana is an incredible fight. Probably top 5 women's MMA fights of all time, in my opinion. I know I'd put it up there. The other 4, probably, Aldana versus Hosa. Obviously Wei Li versus Joanna. I'd put the Rose Joanna 2 matchup in there. There's a couple other fights you could throw up there, but those ones stand out for me for sure as far as the best women's fights I've ever seen. I'm always excited to see her fight, and I hope she can get it done. And then you have Muhammad Usman versus Thomas Peterson, which promises to be the heavyweight slopfest that we know and love for the Apex. Thomas Peterson really just, I don't know. In my opinion, just seems like a very sloppy fighter. He lost to Jamal Pogues in his last fight, and that's really all I need to tell you about him. Jamal Pogues sucks. He's fighting Muhammad Usman, who is at least physically advantaged, so I'm going to side with Usman here, I guess. I don't know, dude. Whatever. It's like, I don't know. If you're betting on this fight, I probably wouldn't, but if you are going to bet on this fight, just put it on the guy who's more athletic, who comes from a better camp, and that's Muhammad Usman. So going through the betting slip for next weekend's card, if there is one, I'm going to take Virna Jandiroba in the main event. I like her chances against Lemos. I think she can outpace her. I like the Iron Turtle against Brad Tavares. I like Steve Garcia versus Sungwoo Choi. And I'll probably just take the over in the Halabao and Algeo fights. Besides that, you could take Miranda Maverick, you could take Muhammad Usman, but these fighters tend to shit the bed sometimes, so it's kind of a risk to take either one of those dudes, or either one of those fighters, as obviously Miranda Maverick is a woman. But yeah, not a terribly exciting card here. But that being said, a fight's a fight, and we could be looking at it next week like, holy shit, every fight was a banger, or so many first round finishes or whatever. I don't really get that sense, but you never know what's going to happen. So that pretty much wraps up the show. I'm going to cue up this music, and we'll get out of here. All right. Thank you very much, folks, for watching and listening. We did pretty good last week, taking the Silva fight 10 by knockout, taking Salakov, taking Nami Yunus, putting the over in the Bonfim fight. And, we lost on a couple of them, but it is what it is. Thank you very much for tuning in. Hopefully we can keep our winning ways rolling next week. And this time next week, we will be talking about Edwards versus Muhammad 2 and Aspinall versus Blades, which promise to be very exciting fights in England. So I appreciate y'all. Thanks for staying tuned, and have a lovely day. Peace out.